Right. Can you all see and hear that okay? Is that all right? Yeah, excellent.
Yeah,
Ing nods. Great. So, good morning, everyone. I'm going to essentially talk you through the fellowship funding opportunities that are available through the NIHR Academy. Just very briefly, the NIHR Academy is one of the many elements of the NIHR, and our remit is to build research leaders and capacity. And one of the key ways we do that is through personalised funding awards, or the fellowships that we offer. The idea is that the fellowships are personal to you, so you would apply for the award and it would be awarded to you, but you do need to have a host organisation through which you would apply for the award, and they would be your employer during the course of the award. And broadly speaking, the three things that you would get as part of your fellowship are salary funding, funding or contribution towards a tailored research training programme that will help you develop to the next stage in your career, and where it's relevant to the award, funding towards your clinical research project. Becoming one of our award holders, you also become an NIHR Academy member, and that attracts a number of benefits. So we have an annual members conference, so you get to meet people on the same journey as you. But there are also educational workshops, and we have a leadership development programme, which you may be able to access as well. So this is a very broad overview of three of the key areas where we fund things. There are other areas, and I'm not really going to touch on them today. And in fact, I'm really only going to be touching on the personal awards and the integrated pathways elements that you can see here. The infrastructure is funding for people that are based at and colleagues working in NIHR infrastructure, so the schools, the BRCs, the ARCs. Whereas the personal awards and the integrated pathways have specific audiences, and that's where the fellowships sit. So in terms of personal awards, they have a broader remit and a more academic focus. There are some exceptions which I'll touch on shortly. And the integrated pathways is where we're looking at specific professional backgrounds and people that want to integrate both their clinical development alongside their academic development. This is a 5-star slide, loads of really good info on here. This shows all of our awards. And you can see that they're broken down at the different levels that the awards sit at. You will notice there's some gaps, which I will touch on later. And you'll also probably notice that there's quite a lot of different awards. So how do you know which is the right award for you to choose? Well, you really want to think about three things. So where are you at in your career at the moment? And where do you want to get to, not only in terms of the next step, but in the long term as well? What are your aspirations? And do you have a specialisation where you want to focus in? And if you can answer those questions, that will help you to determine which of the awards are best for you to choose. And I'm going to go through the awards in a little bit more detail so you can get a bit more information as well. So for example, if you're a nurse, a midwife, allied health professional, you might want to look at our ICA programme, the Integrated Clinical Academic Programme. And if you're just starting out in your career, then you might want to look at the predoctoral level award, which is the Predoctoral Clinical Academic Fellowship, or the PCAF as we call it. There are lots of acronyms, so I'll try my best to not use them too often, or at least define them as we go. But essentially, that's your master's level award. And following on from that, you might then want to do a PhD. So then you would look at the Clinical Doctoral Research Fellowship, the CDRF. Another thing I wanted to just mention here is that we do offer a number of charity partnership fellowships. So these are basically the same standard awards that you've already seen on the other slides, but the idea is that they're joint funded through specific charity partners. So if there's an area that you're working in where there are charities that work in that area as well, it's an opportunity to partner yourselves, build that network with those charities. So what I'd say is, if you are interested in that, have a look at the guidance notes. There are specific charities only, so and it does vary from year to year, from round to round. So have a look at the guidance notes on our website and you'll get all the information about what's available for those. So who am I? Well, my name is Richard Milham and I'm a Programme Manager at the NIHR Academy. My focus is around the integrated pathways element to what we do. So that's both the ICA and the IAP program, so the Integrated Clinical Academic and Integrated Academic Training. So it's those awards where you integrate both the clinical work and development alongside the academic work and development. And specifically, I'm focused around the IPF, the In Practice Fellowship, and the PCAF, the Pre-Doctoral Clinical Academic Fellowship, which are master's level awards. Generally, I'm involved throughout the process, so from when we open our competitions and get the awards set up in the first place, all the way through to when we're identifying who will be funded, contracting their awards, and providing support to people throughout the process. So if you are on that journey through the NIHR or the IAP programs, or if you're going to be, then there's a good chance that either you have spoken to me or you will speak to me. So I'm going to start with the personal awards first. I did mention earlier on that these are quite broad, but the first award in the process, the master's level or the pre-doctoral level award, which is just called the pre-doctoral fellowship, is a little bit more specific. So it's specifically for research methodologists. So if you want to develop in your learning of how to select, process, and analyze data, you know, maybe you want to get into epidemiology, or you're a statistician, data scientist, this is an award that you'd want to look at to get yourself started. I'm not going to go through all of the information that's on the slide. As I said, there's loads of information on the website, and the slides will be available to you after the fact as well. So following on from this award, you've done the sort of master's level training. You might then want to move on to do your PhD. So as you can see, it's a slightly longer award because you need to factor in that you're going to be doing a PhD throughout that. So as part of your PhD, this is where you'll first have your research project. So this not only funds your bespoke training package to the next stage, but also those research costs as part of that as well. It's worth noting that the doctoral fellowship is one of these awards that fits the gaps in that table we were looking at earlier. So where the IAP program, you might have people that would do an IPF or an ACF. There's a gap in the table after that, and that's because what we would hope is that they would then move on to do one of our doctoral fellowships afterwards. So it's worth bearing that in mind because it makes the award even more competitive. All our awards are, of course, competitive, but it's a bigger pool of applicants at this stage. So once you've done your PhD, you'll want to start looking towards becoming more independent as a researcher in your area. And that's where the advanced fellowship comes in. And you don't have to just do one advanced fellowship. So what you might do is an advanced fellowship where you're establishing your independence as a researcher in your field. And then you might also want to do another one where you become a research leader in that area. So there are a lot of different options. You can see it says 2 to 5 years. There is a lot of flexibility in terms of how you would take up the award, and there is flexibility in the other awards as well. And so again, I would say read the guidance notes to have a look at all of the different options that are available. But this is essentially where you've built on the work that you've done at your PhD, you've got that research background, and you want to take it to the next stage, develop those ideas further. The Development Skills Enhancement Award. So this is a bit different to the others. This isn't your traditional fellowship, I suppose. It's a much shorter award and you'll get less funding. But the idea is that if you are at a certain stage in your career, let's say you are already at the master's level, or maybe you've done a master's and you want to do a PhD, but you don't think you've got quite everything you need to get there, you're not quite competitive enough to get your application through, then you can use this award to bridge that gap. So you can put together a small training and development package that will fill that gap in your knowledge and development and take you to the next stage. And then finally, once you are a fully independent research leader in your field, you may want to think about one of our research professorships. As you can imagine, these are huge awards. It's worth bearing in mind that they are through nomination. So essentially, your HEI will have a process locally through which they'll identify the people that they want to nominate. And then once you've been nominated, you yourself would apply through our award management system as you would for the other awards as well. As you can see, not only are you getting that standard package that you would get with the other awards, but you're also getting funding for support posts as well. So maybe you'll have some PhDs alongside you. So now I'm going to move on to The IAP program, or the Integrated Academic Training Program. This is specifically for doctors and dentists. There are 3 awards listed here. There's the ACF, the Academic Clinical Fellowship, and the Clinical Lectureship, and also the In Practice Fellowship, the IPF. The ACF and the IPF are essentially the pre-doctoral master's level awards. The IPF is your more traditional pre-doctoral award, where you've got your master's level training package, getting you to the next stage so you can put in a competitive PhD application. Whereas with the ACF, it's more about integrating the specialty training element and going through the HE specialty program. And as I mentioned before, once you've done an ACF or an IPF, you might then go on to do the doctoral fellowship. And then for the ACFs, they'd then go on to do the CL afterwards, after the doctoral fellowship. So the awards I've spoken about so far, they're all funded via the Department of Health and Social Care, and we manage them at the NIHR Academy. The ICA programme is a little bit different. It's funded through Health Education England and managed by the NIHR Academy. And the idea here is that it's, again, that integration of clinical and academic, but it's specifically aimed at nurses, midwives, allied health professionals, so non-medical healthcare professionals. I'm not going to go through this list in full. It's not an exhaustive list. It is available on our website, and it should be in the guidance notes as well. But just to say, you must be registered in one of the eligible professions in order to apply for an ICA award. This is just a very high-level overview of the pathway. I will talk about the awards in a little bit more depth. But of note, at the top, you'll see there's an internship. And the internship is funded and managed through Health Education England. And the idea is that if you don't have any background in research, or if you've got very little, and you don't think you're quite ready to go to the master's level, you might want a research taster, if you will, and the internship would allow you to do that. The rest of the pathway follows a similar process to the other awards. So you would start out perhaps with the PCAF, which is for aspirant clinical academics, just starting out, that want to get on to be doing a PhD later on in the process. What I think is interesting about the PCAF is that you can actually use it to do a full master's that would be fully funded through the programme. Quite excitingly, this year, we've actually made a change to the structure of the PCAF. So we've obviously talked about the standard PCAF, but there's also now the PCAF Bridge. It's very similar to the Development Skills Enhancement Award, but it's specific to A, the ICA programme, and B, to the master's to PhD level. So if you've perhaps already got a lot of experience behind you and you're almost at the stage where you can put together a competitive PhD application, but you're not quite there, you can apply for the Bridge, which is, again, a smaller award, less funding, but a bespoke training package that would fill that gap and push you to the next stage, which of course would be a PhD. So you might then want to do the Clinical Doctoral Research Fellowship, the CDRF. Similar in a sense to the doctoral fellowship, in that it's a longer award. You've got the research project as part of that. And it's perhaps worth mentioning that as part of the doctoral and beyond level awards, it's a much more competitive process, and there is an interview involved. So once you've done your PhD, again, this is similar to the advanced fellowship, but it's got that profession eligibility criteria behind it. You want to become more independent in your area and become a leader in your area, and that's where the CL and the SCL respectively would come in. Again, you've got that research project that you developed in your PhD, you might want to take it to the next level and build on that, and it's an opportunity to do it. I'll just take an opportunity to say, you may see on the slides that these say things like annual competition. Please do bear in mind that some of that information is subject to change. So I know I keep saying it, but it is important. Please do always check the guidance notes and details on our website for each round. Finally, in terms of the ICA programme, we've got the ICA bridging scheme. And this, again, It's another award very, very similar to the Development Skills Enhancement Award or the PCAF Bridge, but you can think of this as running across the whole series of that programme. So for the NIHR Awards, it's a push to get you to that next level. It's managed and funded through HEE, so you would need to get in touch with HEE to talk to them about it. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail because I think you're going to get more information from the other speakers today about the application process and tips, and they're going to have a wealth of knowledge that goes beyond anything I could tell you. But I'll just touch on some of the key points because I think it's quite handy to know. So if you were to put in an application, what would happen is once we launch the competition, you would need to go onto our award management system, which is called Aramis, and register. I believe you need an ORCID ID to register, so it's always good to try and front load that. You fill in the application form, and then following the competition close, we then perform eligibility and remit checks before we send your applications onto an expert external selection committee who will review all the applications and attend a meeting where they decide which of the applications are best and fundable. That is then sent to the funder, to either HEE or DHSC, depending on the context. And depending on the amount of funding available, they will determine which applications will be funded. So it may very well be that you've put in a competitive application, it's fundable, but unfortunately there's not enough money to fund the award. So it's always important to bear that in mind. And we do send outcomes to everybody, and we do try and provide constructive feedback as best as possible. And as I've mentioned before, for the doctoral and postdoctoral level, you've got the interview, and there is an additional stage where you need to provide extra information. Just a few top tips here. You've seen some of this information already in terms of thinking about which award you want to apply for. That should shine through in your application. If you can show the journey you want to take, i.e. where you are, where you want to go, and where you're going after that, as well as what you need to get to that point and who you need to work with and learn from to get there, then that will shine through and make a fantastic application. So do think about that when you're writing it, paint that narrative for us. And perhaps the last top tip I'm going to give you, I've said it many, many, many times this morning, please do read the guidance notes. It's so important. They're on our website. There's a new version for every round, so it will always have the up-to-date information. You'll also find other information on our website as well, general information, but there's usually also a chair's brief, and that has information about the successes and the lessons that were learned from the previous round. So it's always good to have a look at some of that if you really want to get an edge. And just lastly, a couple of other bits and pieces. If you're unsuccessful, can you apply again? Well, broadly speaking, the answer is yes. It does vary from scheme to scheme, so as I say, do check. But usually you can apply at least once again. If you're deemed fundable, but you weren't funded, you can usually keep trying again and again. But there are certain limitations where if you've applied once and you've applied again and then you weren't funded each time, you're unsuccessful, then there's a substantial waiting period. I think for NIHR, it might be something of the order of 3 years that you would have to wait before you can put in another application. So do bear that in mind. And finally, here's a really useful slide. Lots of useful information, some good links. So do grab the slides after this and have a look. These are fantastic resources that are available to you. Obviously, I'm going to give a shout out to the RDS. So important that you get in touch with them if you've got a project element to your fellowship. The training advocates as well. They are people that have walked the same journey. Many of them have been on selection committees as well. Get in touch with them and get their expertise and guidance. And finally, if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Richard. That was very insightful. We only had one question into the chat box. Oh, no, someone else just sent another one. I've got 2 questions. The first one is from someone from the University of Brighton who's actually got a professional doctorate in physiotherapy, and they want to know, does that qualify as a prerequisite? So can they still apply for the advanced fellowship based on that professional doctorate?
Oh, that's a good question. Specifically, I don't know the answer to that. I'd need to investigate and find out. it would depend on the eligibility criteria for the scheme. So if you can get in touch with me after the fact, I'm happy to look into that for you. I think probably that's okay, but I'd want to double check before I say with absolute certainty if that's all right. If you're happy to pass my details on after the fact, I'll investigate.
Yeah, I'll pass it on to that person.
Thank you.
And there's another question. So it says, hi Richard, could you please elaborate on the 2 application stages, stage 1 and stage 2 for doctoral fellowships?
Yeah, of course. So depending on the scheme, it depends on the level of information that's required. But what you can broadly think of is that stage 1 is your overarching application and proposal. So it's where you put your training plan in, what you want to do, what your project is, who your supervisors and mentors are going to be, where you're going to do the award. And then that will inform the shortlisting process into stage 2. So once you get to stage 2 and things are a little bit more firmed up, that's where we'll start saying, well, actually, what's your budget going to be? How much funding do you need to make this happen? So that's the sort of information we'd be looking for at that stage, generally speaking. So it's once things are a little bit more firmed up, we ask for the details. Whereas if you're just doing a single stage award, such as the PCAF, the master's pre-doctoral levels, you just put it all in together at the start.
Okay, thank you. And I had one other question of my own. So I noticed it said for the Development Skills Advancement Award that you needed to be an NIHR Academy member. What does that mean?
So you need to hold one of our awards essentially. So if you're on the journey with us, if you've done one of our awards, then you want to top up, then you can use the DSC to do that. So you can't just apply for it out of nowhere. You have to be one of our members.
Already part of the system.
Exactly.
And then with the bridging awards, then you don't need to be.
Well, that is a good question, and I'm not exactly sure. I think there might be more flexibility there, but that would be a question for HEE.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, more questions coming in.
Sure.
Are there any specific requirements or recommendations if a PCAF application tries to secure funding for a taught MSc programme?
Well, that's a very good question. Not specifically. So I suppose that there's a bit of a balance with it, because if you're going to do a full master's, then you can't have the training package alongside it. So you have to choose which is going to be more appropriate for you. If you want to do the master's, you need to be able to justify why that's the right thing for you instead of the training program, and why you need that to get to the next stage. But beyond that, I don't think there's any specific criteria around whether or not you're eligible to apply for the Masters. Does that answer the question, or do you want me to discuss anything more specific?
I think that helps. I think that answers the question. Yeah. Is there still an interview stage for the doctoral fellowship?
Oh, good question. I believe there is. See, it's not my area of expertise.
Yeah,
but I believe there is.
Yeah.
Because I think it's just standard process across all of our awards at those levels.
Yeah.
But there are people from the panel here today that will talk to you about that later on.
Yeah. I'll leave it there. I'll add the other questions to the panels. So thank you very much. And going on to, so 5-minute break now, Claire?
Yes, 5-minute comfort break, and then we'll come back and go into the first of the parallel sessions.